We're back with another episode of Plastic Surgery Uncensored. Your host, Dr. Radi Raban. I'm Monique Marvez, and we're getting to the down and dirty now. We're getting to the money. Show me the money. So there's all sorts of options to finance plastic surgery. But at the end of the day, I think first we have to talk about how you decide how much you're going to pay. Because earlier, you and I were talking about how you can get this for $10,000 or $50,000. So I'd like you to maybe break down the costs of some things, but also why they cost that and how you should choose.
So first thing you need to do is you need to first determine for yourself why something costs something, right? So that's how I do things when I want to buy things in life. And plastic surgery is, unfortunately, it's no different. You're buying something. You're buying a service, okay? So you're going to go do your consults and you go from doctor to doctor. Hopefully you've done good research. You have good reason for going to the doctors. And you're going to get, let's say, 3 quotes. And those 3 quotes are going to vary. And one of them is going to be 10 grand, one's going to be 20 grand, one's going to be 30 grand. And then you're going to have to ask yourself, your natural tendency is like, why the hell am I going to spend 30 grand when I can do this for 10 grand? Well, you and I both know that there's a possibility that they're not the same. Right?
Yes.
Just because you pay more doesn't mean that it's better, but there is a possibility that when you pay more, better, let's put it this way, just because you pay more, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better, but usually when you pay less, you get less, if that makes sense.
It does.
So what you need to ask yourself...
And the needs are different from plastic surgery to a handbag.
Correct. But what bottom line is what you have to ask yourself is what makes up the cost? And then once you figure out what makes up the cost, you need to ask yourself personally, do I care that in exchange for paying less, I don't get X, Y, and Z?
Exactly. That's what I want to hear about.
So what are the costs of, what makes up the cost of a procedure? Obviously, the most important element and entity is your surgeon. So what are you paying for? You're paying for, on one end, let's say the top end, you're paying for a board certified plastic surgeon, as opposed to a non-board certified cosmetic surgeon, which I'll elaborate. Board certified plastic surgeon who specializes in what you want.
Right, what you want done.
What you want done. And how you know that is not based on the propaganda that he or she spews out on their website, but rather an extensive portfolio or gallery of before and after photos demonstrating successful and amazing outcomes. So what that means is if your surgeon says all over his website that he is a rhinoplasty expert, but when you go to his gallery, there's 6 photos and 2 of them are good and 4 of them suck, then he is not an expert in what he does.
Nope.
So board certified plastic surgeon who is an expert in what it is that you want done, who has an extensive review, like extensive reviews indicating that he's a decent human being. So what that means is you've demonstrated they're well-trained, you looked at their work, they execute good things, and then you read and you see that, is this person kind, a good person? Why does that matter? When the shit hits...
I was just going to ask you that.
Why that matters is when the shit hits the fan and something doesn't go right, that's when you're going to care that your doctor is kind. That's when you're going to care that your doctor has a conscience or has integrity.
See, these things to me are priceless, but I think it's, back in the day, it was sort of like the tormented artist and they had certain dispositions, and we grew up with the notion of this sort of temperamental doctor that didn't have to answer your questions because he was the doctor.
Those days are long gone.
Yeah,
so that's on one end. And on the other end is a non-board certified, non-plastic surgeon being a cosmetic surgeon, which basically means what? Means OBGYN, general surgeon, orthopedist, ENT, whatever.
Right.
Who doesn't specialize in what you do, as I mentioned, doesn't have a ton of experience with portfolio. And when you read the reviews, it's mixed, it's hit or miss. It's like, yeah, they're okay, they're not okay, whatever. So when you say this thing costs 10 grand, 30 grand, that's a biggest bulk of it.
Okay.
Secondly, is you're paying for the anesthesiologist, the co-pilot, who's going to be taking care of you when you're under anesthesia. I, for example, use my own core group of anesthesiologists. We're board certified. So again, they're on the upper echelon. I know them. They took care of my niece. They took care of my mom.
There's a shorthand.
I've been working with them for 12 to 15 years. They're awesome. Conversely, you can have, for example, a nurse anesthetist. Nothing wrong with it. I know many nurse anesthetists. They're amazing. They're wonderful. But they're not, in my opinion, at the caliber of a board certified anesthesiologist and hence will cost less.
Right. Do you see people that do a sort of column A to column B, like, well, I'd like to have this surgeon, but maybe we could do it at that. Do you have people that try to juggle?
When you come to a physician, you're going to go with whatever his plan is. And the next component is the facility. I mean, you're having the surgery done, right? People don't even bother to ask, where am I having this done? They're assuming Dr. Joe Schmo is going to have a good facility. That is not the case. So you have on the better end a standalone surgery center that's state-of-the-art, Medicare certified, which we talked about, which means that Medicare comes in and rips this place apart and makes sure that there are all these ridiculous standards, versus on the other end, something that's certified by a quasi...
I've seen surgeons that do stuff in their own offices in the back.
Office space in some tiny little room with barely a crash cart. So those are things you consider. And then finally is care. Like in my office, if you come see me for a rhinoplasty, hypothetically, you're going to see me for 10 years. 10 years. And
Wow.
10 years. 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. And you will not spend $1
And
on
why
a single
is that?
visit. Why? Because in order for you to see the outcome of a
10 years
rhinoplasty,
later.
it takes 10 years. And so if your doctor is going to see you on 1 week and on 3 weeks and say, listen, you look good, keep me posted if there's an issue, I think there's a huge problem with that. I actually call the patients and be like, where the hell are you? You didn't show up for your follow-up. So when you look at the
5 years.
yes.
amazing.
When you look at the cost of something, now that you have this figured out, then you say to yourself, you know what? I don't give a crap. I don't care if my doctor sees me 10 times. I don't care if my doctor uses CRNA. I don't care. And then the last part is, okay, so I do, for example, let's say breast aug,
Okay.
2 hours. National average, 30 minutes. I do a tummy tuck, 4 hours. National average, 2 hours. So the quick and the speed at which your doctor does the case determines how much money he or she is going to spend in the OR, paying the anesthesiologist and the facility. So as you can imagine, if the surgeon does things quickly, it will cost less. Quickly and plastic surgery are oil and water. Nothing great gets done quickly. There's a reason it takes me 4 hours. It's not because I got nothing better to do. It's because closing takes a long time. So when you
Can we repeat that? Because I have to sidebar. I met a nurse friend of mine, a nurse. She's a nurse. And she said, how do you know Dr. Raban? And I said, how do you know I know Dr. Raban? And she said, I saw you on his Instagram. I follow him at Dr. Roddy Raban. He redid my boobs. And I'm not going to mention her name, but she wouldn't show them to me. I really wanted to see them. But she said that as a nurse, that she had a revision. You actually fixed something for her. And she said that you close your own sutures and that she thought if it were just kind of better, okay, she'd be happy. But the fact that you close, you don't let other people close. A lot of women don't know that one guy opens up. My mother's a nurse and said that Dr. DeBakey, the famous heart surgeon, he would just go from room to room, like doing stuff, and then people would just follow him and close them up. You don't do that.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. And so you have to ask. So again,
nobody knows that.
So back to what I said is, if you find out that your surgeon, for example, lets his tech close or has a junior, and as a result,
isn't that more the norm?
Correct. I would say it's about 80%, 95, 90% of patients. If that's the case, then you could say to yourself, well, you know what? It's fine. I don't give a shit. I don't mind. And it's not worth it.
Isn't that where the scarring occurs?
It is. But the point being is that people don't even know when they say it's 10 grand or 30 grand, nobody knows what that means. So that's very important when it comes to finance.
So if you were able to tell somebody for an extra $3,000 for whatever it is, your scars will be minimal because I'm the person who closes them. Don't you think people would opt for that?
I think people would, but that's not discussed. So that's really the main issue, is become knowledgeable what the cost is. The second issue with financing is, aside from figuring out what you're paying for, you actually have to physically at the end pay for it. You have to physically pay for it. And
you have a philosophy.
I have a philosophy about this. So here are my thoughts. Number one, never buy anything you can't afford. I mean, this is something that was taught to me by my dad, and I think is a basic philosophy of the American fiber. The problem is we've become this nation of credit cards and debt and things like that. It doesn't mean that you can't finance the surgery. You finance a home, you finance a car, and you certainly can finance a surgery, but you have to have a real game plan. And it always pains me when I see patients come in here and they come to see me, they've done all their homework, they know everything, they're in love with me, they know everything, and then they're like not financially prepared to do it. They didn't really think it through. And then as a result, one of two things happen. Either they decide not to do it and never do it and are sad and never have a plan to do it, or they shortcuts and do it for cheaper and then have a bad outcome. So you got to have a game plan.
Okay.
And the game plan is find out how much something...
And is the third thing that people do, and I'm just asking, if people meet you, fall in love with you, want to have the surgery, how do you make the decision that they're worth that and that maybe they can finance it again like you would finance a car? Like there are options. Priorities, financial priorities.
So how the way you pay for it. So I think you need to consider this a massive decision in your life that you need to have a conversation with your loved ones, your husband and your wife. And you need to plan for it like you would the college education of a child or a home. And if you do that, I think it's quite feasible. You find out how much something costs at the place that you want to go, and you don't compromise. You say to yourself, I've done my homework and I love Dr. X. And Dr. X costs Y. And so me and my husband decided that we're going to plan towards having done. So if you wait an extra 6 months and as a result you save an extra...
Or a year.
Whatever, a year, 6 months, and you save extra money, but in exchange you get exactly what you want, doesn't that make more sense than to go impulsively? You start doing some homework, you go on Instagram, you decide you want a breast dog, you end up going to the doctor, you love them, and then you can't afford it, so you just say, screw it, and then go somewhere else and get a mediocre or botched job?
I see breast dogs on Groupon. Who does that?
Non-board certified plastic surgeons. That's who does it.
When we come back, I'd like to discuss the psychology of that decision because I think men and women have very different ways of approaching large expenditures for themselves. Can we dive into that?
Let's do it.
Okay. We're back with Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Rady Rahban. I'm Monique Marvez, and this is what I have experienced and seen. Women have a whole different psychology about spending large amounts of money on themselves than men do. A man doesn't think twice if he wants expensive golf clubs. But in a weird way, women, and especially women with families or children, there's almost like a direct line, like mom's boob job will take food out of your mouth. It's so much harder for women to pull those triggers than men.
It's actually, you're spot on. I have seen this hundreds and hundreds of times where moms come into the office, they have breastfed 3 kids, raised 3 kids, and all of a sudden they're at this point in their lives where they're relatively unhappy with the way their body looks after having really sacrificed for their family.
Huge sacrifice.
And there's this sort of dialogue that we have, which is they know they want to get this improvement, they want to get their mojo back, and they feel this immense guilt. And the guilt is, I don't know if this is right. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe we should be saving this for our kids' college funds. Maybe, what if something happens to me? And there's this immense guilt that revolves around, particularly moms, but women in general, about whether or not they're worthy or they're worth the money. And the funny thing about it is, and then I'll ask them, I'll say, almost always, I say, well, what does your husband think? And this is the answer. My husband loves me the way that I am. And while in the first moment,
does that make me a bad person for saying, no, he doesn't?
Yeah.
He just says that because he doesn't want you to yell at him.
So while on the first moment, that sounds beautiful, the reality is, more often than not, that is not the case. And the case is as follows. Number 1, it's financially burdensome. So maybe he doesn't want to spend that money. Number 2, people get into a very common rut where they're just satisfied with mediocrity of the way life is, and they don't want to shake things up.
Would I? Hair lip.
Number three, there are a lot of my patients who after marriage, and I hate to say this, end up getting divorced because they were in very unpleasant relationships. And once they got their mojo back and they felt empowered and they felt beautiful and they felt sexy, they realized that the relationship was not good and they were in a very unpleasant marriage with their husbands. And so husbands sense that they would rather their wives not look fantastic. So it doesn't matter what the reason is. You're doing it for yourself. You've earned it. You deserve it. And you are worth it, and you have to financially plan for it so that you can do it just like anything else. So spot on 100%. There's a huge psychological component when it comes to spending money.
And you're obviously, it's not because you're the doctor. When you talk about being a wonderful human being, for the record, and I'm not just saying this, he really is an amazing human being. No, you really are. Because I've had several encounters where I've kind of asked questions and gotten quite personal, and that matters. And I think that when a doctor genuinely cares about the woman 360, that's going to make a difference in helping her to move forward. Because in essence, you're shepherding someone's journey to self-esteem.
No, it's really, I mean, the number of transformations and the empowerment that I've witnessed in women, obviously I have male patients and they too become empowered, but women, it's just a different entity. And
you change their lives.
A lot of time, because it's a different kind of process, particularly moms. You end up literally sacrificing your body for the betterment of your husband,
you take one
your
for the
family,
team.
and for the kids. And then when you finally get your life back, it's such an amazing experience. The tears, the joy, the excitement. And if it's in a good environment, the husband and wife become so much closer. And so I think finances, it's a great topic. And I think the fact is that the question
psychology of money is
that
a
we
great
talked
topic.
about was whether or not am I worth it? And I think the reality is you are worth it.
When we did I'm going to get the name wrong, the dinosaur name.
Diastasis recti.
Thank you. When we were talking to your patient in a previous episode, how much did something like that cost that young woman?
Hers, you have to preface it because nobody knows what you're talking about if they didn't hear the audio. She had an extensive degree of abdominal diastasis. She required a reconstruction. Her case was 5 hours, so it was a very complex case. A standard garden variety abdominoplasty with diastasis correction can range between $15,000 to $25,000 for a patient at a high-end office.
And the before and after pictures, you can't put a dollar amount on what those before and after pictures represent. As a mother, as a woman, there's no money.
I think what happens is this. What I would say to people is you find someone, you look at their work, you love it. You just amazed. This person really does amazing work.
This is the one.
You go there and you realize that person is 30% more expensive than your budget. Let's say hypothetically, which is very realistic. I mean, and you go there and this is what I say, and I'll end it with this. If you go there and it turns out that the doctor you want, who's going to give you the result you deserve, is more expensive than you anticipated, save money. That's it. Simple as that. Go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I need to save $3,000 more. At the rate that I make money every month and with expenses that I have, that's going to take me 7 months. No problem. You've waited this long, you wait another 7 months. That's the answer. You understand what I mean? Because the reality is that if you wait, you'll get it done right. Versus just compromising and shortcutting. And as you had said on many occasions, this is not a sweater. This is not something you're going to return.
No, this is you.
And this is a one and done. So that's my philosophies on financing.
Great. We are now wrapping up the financial component. This is Plastic Surgery Uncensored with Dr. Roddy Raban. I'm Monique Marvez. And again, I walk away from this thinking, wow, the women don't think this deep. It's exciting.